Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got some additional questions for you, Mr. Canterbury. In 2017, there was a message to FOP members in which you urged them to speak out in support of then Attorney General Jeff Sessions' announcement that the federal civil asset forfeiture program would be expanded. And as I recall, while touting the virtues of the equitable sharing program, and by the way, the equitable sharing program here refers to something I've long opposed, something that I had opposed at the time and for years before then. Equitable sharing in the civil asset forfeiture context refers to the mechanism by which some state and local law enforcement agencies, in many cases otherwise hindered by more aggressive and restrictive laws governing civil asset forfeiture, will turn to federal law enforcement officials and ask for their help getting the federal law enforcement offices involved in seizing civilly assets, and then in return for this cooperation, they will both get a share of the proceeds of this. Sometimes this is used to fund law enforcement operations, and for reasons that I think are apparent to anyone who examines it carefully, this is a problem that's rife with opportunities for abuse, because all of a sudden the presumptions that ordinarily would apply in the criminal context are flipped. Somebody's property gets seized, perhaps in order to fund a government agency or otherwise, and it's then up to them to prove that they didn't do anything wrong. So I've long signaled that I've got concerns with this. And at the time you touted the program and the federal government's expanded use of it, you said, quote, "This program has a long history in law enforcement of success, and these elected chicken littles need to hear from us that the sky is not falling," close quote. Did you in fact say that, Mr. Canterbury?
Yes, sir, I did.
Do you regard the concerns of members of Congress, including myself, with regard to the equitable sharing program as frivolous?
No, sir. There were a number of advocacy groups that were accusing law enforcement of being thieves at that time, and that's who we directed those comments at.
Okay, so you were not, in fact, accusing this reference, which paints with a pretty broad brush, to chicken littles, extended only to those who specifically used the word thief?
To the best of my recollection, Senator, was the context at that time. I testified before this very committee in support of the civil asset forfeiture laws that then Senator Sessions had written. But one of the most important parts of my testimony was that we believed that the adjudication process needed to be very swift and very quick, that the citizens that had assets that were seized, that there was a change in the adjudication.
Do you agree that equitable sharing may create a perverse incentive for state and local law enforcement agencies to run roughshod over the rights of individual citizens, and that this risk merits reevaluation of the program?
I believe any ethical police officer would not do that, Senator Lee. But I believe if anybody did do that, then they would be in violation of the law.
Do you agree that the program itself creates an inherent risk of that, one that could lead to that, perhaps even with the best intention? Now, look, I'm a former federal prosecutor. I love police. I think police do great work. I also understand that police are human beings. And human beings are flawed. They sometimes make mistakes, sometimes deliberately, sometimes with the best of intentions. Do you agree that there are legitimate concerns there relate to the fact that police are human beings, and we ought to be concerned about the power, the immense power they can have to seize cash, real property, or other types of personal property, and then put the burden on the citizen to prove that they didn't do anything wrong as a condition precedent for getting back that which is already theirs?
In my experience, Senator Lee, almost all asset forfeitures that I've been associated with have been with a litany of other factors that would cause a police officer to seize those assets. I do believe that a police officer should not make any kind of final determination. That should be set aside for an adjudicator way beyond the law enforcement officer.